A girl I've never met is standing at my gate, holding a coffee can I gave away 20 years ago.
Margie Coyle did not remember the mother. That was the part that shamed her. A young woman had once stood on this same land when she had nothing, and Margie had given her a can of seeds and a few words on the lid. She forgot all of it. But the woman kept that can for 20 years, planted from it every spring, and told her daughter it was the only gift she ever received that asked for nothing in return. Now the mother was gone. The daughter was at the gate with nowhere left to go, and Margie's own farm was one missed payment from being taken. She was 78. Her hands shook too much to plant, and everything she had spent 50 years saving was about to die with her, unless the daughter of a woman she couldn't even remember could bring it back. The can was rusted shut at the seams, and the girl held it like it still might spill. It was the first thing Margie saw. Not the car, not the girl's face, just two hands wrapped around a dented coffee tin, worn red-brown at the rim. The car behind her told the rest. It sat at the end of the gravel drive with one cracked headlight and a back seat packed to the windows, the way a car looks when it has stopped being a car and started being a place to live. The gate between them had not been opened in a while. Margie heard it before she saw the girl try the latch, the long iron groan of a hinge that had given up on grease. Above the post, a board read, "Coyle Heirloom Seed Farm." The paint blistered and peeling until the words looked like they were trying to leave. Beyond it, the fields lay flat and brown, 3 weeks ahead of when they should have turned. The big shed leaned south. A line of empty bean trellises stood in the low fog like a fence with half its pickets gone. Morning damp still sat in the rows. The air smelled of wet ground and dry stalks. A place at the hinge of the season, when the growing is done and the dying isn't finished. Margie came out onto the porch, slow, one hand on the post, one on the rail. 78 years will do that to a body. Her knuckles had swelled in the night, the way they did now when the cold came early, and she thought about each step before she took it. "Help you?" she called. The girl turned. Young, 20s maybe, with the kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night. She did not let go of the can. "Are you Mrs. Coyle? Marguerite Coyle?" "I am." The girl came to the gate, but not through it. She lifted the can a little. "The way you offer something, or the way you hold up proof." "You gave this to my mother," she said. Margie looked at the tin. An ordinary thing. A Folgers can, the old kind, the red gone to rust along the lip. She had owned a dozen like it over the years. For nails, for buttons, for seed. "I've given a lot of things to a lot of people," she said. Not unkind, just true. The girl worked something loose in her throat before she spoke again. 20 years ago, she stayed here, one season. I was with her. I was small. A pause. Grace. Her name was Grace. The name landed somewhere in Margie and did not catch. 20 years. In that stretch, she had buried her husband and her sister and most of the people who would have remembered the same summers she did. She searched the girl's face for something she ought to know, and found only a stranger asking to be recognized. Margie looked at the can for a long time. Then she said the only thing she could. "I don't think I know you." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and dry earth, the way a place smells when it keeps more than it spends. Margie had not decided to let the girl in. It happened the way most things on a farm happen. One small step, then the next. The girl was still standing at the open gate with that can in her hands, and a person did not leave another person standing in the cold while she figured out what to do with her. So Margie said, "Well, come out of the wind anyway," and turned for the door. And the latch fought her the way it always did now. Her fingers had swelled overnight. She worked the thumb bolt twice before it gave, and she felt the girl watching her hands, and she did not like it. 40 years she had thrown that bolt without looking. Now it took thinking. The girl, Hannah, she'd said, somewhere back at the gate, followed her through the kitchen, past the table to a door most people never knew was there. Margie opened it. She did not say anything. She let the room do it. Shelves ran floor to ceiling on 3 walls, and every shelf held jars. Hundreds of them. Glass jars, baby food jars, mason jars with the rings gone orange. Each one filled partway with seed and labeled in a hand that changed across the decades. Beans the color of river stones. Corn in a dozen shades nobody sold anymore. Squash seed, flat and pale, like coins worn smooth. Hannah went quiet in the doorway. It was the quiet of someone who understood what she was looking at. "This is your grandmother's room?" she asked. "Mine," Margie said, "and the people before me." She lifted a jar. The label read, "Aunt Pearl's Pole Bean, 1971. Pearl had been dead 30 years. The bean was not. Margie set it back and touched another, Daniel's Glass Gem, Fall 88, and her hand stopped there a moment longer than it needed to. "My husband found that one at a county sale," she said. "Paid too much. Argued about it for a week." She did not say the rest. That he had grown it every year after. That the last row he ever planted was that corn, and she had let it go to seed because she could not bring herself to eat it. Hannah stepped in, careful, reading labels the way some people read gravestones. "Some of these, there's no commercial source for these anymore. They only exist if someone keeps growing them out." She looked at Margie. "How many varieties?" "Stopped counting at 400. The girl said nothing for a while. Then, low, "Mrs. Coyle, this is a seed bank. A real one." Margie had never called it that. To her it was just the room where the names lived. Every jar in that room had a name. Most of them belonged to people already gone. She would have said more, maybe, if the girl hadn't turned toward the desk in the corner. Margie saw where she was looking and felt something tighten. The bottom drawer hung open a finger's width, too full to close. Inside, a slumped stack of envelopes, all of them with the same return address. None of them opened. Margie had been not opening them for months. It had become a thing she was good at. And on the desktop, face up where she'd left it, a business card. Heavy stock, embossed. Hannah read it before Margie could move. "Brandt Genetics." "They've been by." Margie crossed the room slower than she wanted to. She picked up a jar near the card and gave it a small shake, just to hear it. The dry whisper of seed against glass, a sound she had loved her whole life. Twice now. What do they want? Margie didn't answer that. Some questions you answer by what you do with your hands. The card said Brandt Genetics. She turned it face down without a word, the way you cover something you don't want a stranger to see. Hannah set the can on the table and worked the lid loose with her thumbs, slow, the way you open something you're afraid to break. Margie had put coffee on without asking. It was what you did, even for a stranger, even when your hands were full of questions. The pot ticked on the stove behind them. She watched the girl ease the rusted lid up, and what was inside was not what she expected. Not coins, not buttons. Seed, small packets, folded from waxed paper gone amber with age, each one creased and recreased, opened 100 times, closed careful every time. Hannah lifted one out and held it like it had weight beyond what it had. My mother's name was Grace Okafor, she said. She stayed here 20 years ago, one whole season. Margie reached back into the years for it. She tried. The name was a shape she almost knew, the way you almost know a tune from another room. But 20 years was a long road, and she had walked a lot of it carrying coffins. Her sister, 2 neighbors, Daniel, 6 years back, who took most of her memory of the good summers with him when he went. I'm sorry, Margie said, and meant it as more than manners. I don't recall her face. I was little. 6. Hannah turned the packet in her fingers. I don't remember much either. Just pieces. She smiled, and it cost her something. The smell of tomatoes when they split on the vine. A bean trellis taller than I was. I thought it went up to the sky. Margie knew that trellis. It still stood out there in the fog, half its pickets gone. She wrote you, Hannah said, for years. Every fall, after harvest, I wrote her back. Margie said it before she'd decided to. It surfaced on its own. A memory not of Grace's face, but of her own hand. A kitchen table, a stamp. I think I did, for a while. You did. She kept them. Hannah looked down. Then they stopped, both ways. And here it was, the thing Margie had felt coming since the gate. She braced for an accusation. It didn't come. When your husband passed, Hannah said quietly, you went somewhere people couldn't follow. My mother understood that. She'd lost people too. She figured you'd grieved your way out of reach, and the last thing you needed was one more person at the door wanting something. She set the packet down. She was proud like that. She'd rather miss you than be a weight on you. Margie's throat worked. 2 people, each deciding to spare the other, and 20 years falling into the gap between them. There's this, too. Hannah took a single envelope from her coat. The handwriting on it was Margie's own. She knew it at a glance, the way you know your own voice on a recording and flinch. Across the front, stamped in faded red, return to sender, address changed. You tried, Hannah said. Once, after a while. By then we'd moved. She never knew you'd reached for her. Margie held the letter. She turned it over. She did not open it. Why come now? She asked. The question she'd been holding since the porch. Hannah was quiet a moment. When she spoke, the room got very still. She passed in March. Cancer. The word came out flat, worn smooth from too much handling. Near the end, she gave me the can, told me to find you, not to ask you for anything. She was clear about that, just to bring it back and to say thank you. She looked up, and her eyes were wet but steady. My mother kept this can for 20 years. She planted from it every spring. She said it was the only thing anyone ever gave her that asked for nothing back. The pot had stopped ticking. Outside, the fog was lifting off the dead rose, slow, and on the lid, in pencil gone soft with age, 4 words, neither of them read aloud yet. For when you're ready to start again. She had already picked up the can to leave when Margie saw the back seat, packed to the windows with everything the girl owned. It was the kind of thing you noticed without meaning to. A folded quilt against the glass, a milk crate of books, A pair of work boots set neat on the floorboard, toes pointed out. Ready. Nobody packed a car like that for a trip. You packed it like that when the car was the only room you had left. You driving back tonight? Margie asked. She kept her voice flat, giving the girl room to lie if she needed to. I'll find somewhere. Hannah said it easy, practiced. I just wanted to bring the can. That was the whole of it. She moved toward the door. Hold on. Margie didn't plan the words. They came up out of the same place the coffee had. You said agronomy. That a degree or just talk? Hannah stopped. Sustainable ag, Iowa State, 2 years out. Then tell me something. Margie nodded at the jar still sitting by the Brandt card. That squash seed on the desk. How'd you know if it was still good? Hannah crossed back without thinking. It was the first time all morning she'd moved like she wasn't braced for a door to close. She tipped a few flat seeds into her palm, picked one up, and rolled it slow between thumb and forefinger. She pressed a thumbnail to the edge. Feels dry clear through. No give. She held it to the window light. Coat's still got its sheen. It hasn't gone chalky. I'd guess 70–80% germination. You'd want to grow a tray out to be sure, but I wouldn't throw it away. She set it back, careful. Every seed returned to the same jar. Whoever saved it knew what they were doing. Margie watched the girl's hands the way the girl had watched hers at the latch. Steady, sure. Hands that knew the difference between a live seed and a dead one by feel. She thought about the 400 jars in the next room, and her own fingers, swollen stiff every morning, that could no longer thresh a bean pod without spilling half of it. It had been a long time since anyone in this house could tell good seed from bad. A whole season's planting was coming, and she could not do it alone. She had known that for a year and had not said it out loud to a single soul. I'm not going to stand here and feel sorry for you, Margie said. You'd hate it, and so would I. She turned for the stove, busying her hands so neither of them had to make it a moment. But I've got a seed room that needs working, and a back that won't bend. And you've got a degree and a car you're sleeping in. Seems foolish for both of us to pretend otherwise. Hannah didn't answer right away. 3 meals and a place to sleep, Margie said. Not charity. The seed room needs hands that don't shake. It was the closest she had come, in 6 years, to admitting hers did. Hannah looked at her for a long moment. At the kitchen, the room beyond it full of names, the old woman pretending to fuss with a coffee pot that was already off. Then she set her keys back on the table. It was the first time in 6 years Margie had asked anyone to stay. The car that pulled in that afternoon was clean in a way nothing on the farm was clean anymore. It came up the gravel slow, picking its way around the ruts. A silver sedan with not a speck of dust where dust lived on everything else. The man who got out wore a pressed shirt and good shoes that would never be the same color again by the time he reached the porch. He looked at the leaning shed, the dead rose, the peeling sign, and he did not let any of it show on his face. That was its own kind of rude. Mrs. Coyle, he had a folder under his arm. Caleb Reynolds, Brandt Genetics. We spoke on the phone. We did. Margie did not ask him in. He stayed pleasant about it. He set the folder on the porch rail and opened it anyway and slid a single page toward her. There was a number on it. Margie did not reach for the page, but she saw the number, and it was a large one. Large enough to clear the drawer full of letters she hadn't opened. Large enough to leave a person something to sit on at the end. That's for the land and the collection both, Caleb said. Every variety. We'd catalog all of it. Climate-controlled storage, full genetic backup. Mrs. Coyle, with respect, you've built something that belongs in this century, and it's sitting in baby food jars in a room that floods when it rains hard. It's never flooded. It will. He said it gently. He believed it. That was the thing about him, well, he wasn't selling. He thought he was rescuing. You're 78. Forgive me. When you're gone, who grows these out? Who keeps 400 varieties alive? Your sons in the city? These seeds die with you, in those jars, unless someone with the means steps in. I'm offering to be that someone, and the worst of it was that it landed. Margie felt it land. She had lain awake on that exact fear more nights than she'd admit. Hannah had come out onto the porch behind her, quiet. She'd been reading the page over Margie's shoulder, and now she spoke for the first time. What happens to the varieties after you catalog them? Caleb turned, mild. We preserve them, study them, breed improved lines off the best of them. Drought tolerance, disease resistance. That's the future of this material. Breed off them. Hannah nodded slowly. And the improved lines. Brandt patents those. Trademarks the names. A small pause. Proprietary lines protect the investment, yes. So Mrs. Coyle's beans go in. And what comes out the other side? Nobody can save or replant or pass to a neighbor without a license. Hannah's voice stayed even. Her grandmother's pole bean becomes your intellectual property, with a registered name. Caleb's smile held, but it cost him something now. That's a cynical way to put it. It's the accurate way. He gathered his folder. He left the page with the number on it, the way they always do. Think it over, Mrs. Coyle. The bank won't wait, and I'm the only offer that makes this easy. He went down the steps, careful, and the clean car backed out, and the dust settled over it at last. Margie stood holding the page. They've been by twice, she said. He always talks like that, like he's doing me a kindness. Hannah waited until the car was gone from the road. Then quiet. They don't want to keep your seeds. They want to breed from them and fence in whatever comes out. The line stops being yours. It stops being anyone's. Margie looked at the jar on the windowsill with Daniel's name on the label, fall of '88, the corn he'd argued about for a week. She folded the page once, then again, and set it down beside the jar. She said nothing. He had not been wrong about the dying. He had only been wrong about the why. Hannah stayed. The weeks went by, and she earned her place the way you do on a farm, by being useful before she was thanked. She learned the seed room. Margie learned to let her. The first frost came early that year, 3 weeks early, and it came for the tomatoes. They had a plan by then. Hannah had laid it out at the kitchen table over 2 nights. Sell the heirloom seed proper, with germination tested and labeled. Dry tomatoes for the winter market. Take a stall at the Saturday lot in Decorah, where people drove an hour to pay for the real thing. None of it would clear the debt. All of it might keep the farm breathing long enough to fight. Margie had listened and grunted and let the girl try, which from Margie was a yes, but a plan needs a crop, and the crop needs to live to October. The radio said it first, a Tuesday, the man's voice flat between the grain prices. Hard freeze tonight, low of 28. Hannah was already at the window watching the sky go that hard, clear color that means no clouds to hold the warmth in. The seed tomatoes, she said. The glass gem row, the old ones. If we lose them, we lose the seed for next year. There's no buying it back. Margie was already reaching for her coat. They worked the row from dusk on. Bed sheets, feed sacks, an old painter's tarp, anything to hold a few degrees against the ground. Hannah hauled and Margie clipped and tucked, and when Margie's fingers seized up around the clothespins, swollen and slow in the cold, Hannah did not take the work away from her. She knelt down beside her in the dirt and held the old woman's hand steady around the pin and pushed with her, the two of them setting each clip together, and neither of them said a word about it. The smoke came next. Margie kept a charcoal burner from the old days for exactly this. They lit it at the head of the row and fed it slow, and the smoke pooled low over the plants the way it was meant to, holding the frost off the leaves. The cold came down hard after midnight. It bit through 2 coats. It settled on Hannah's cheeks until they ached, and the air filled with the green, bruised smell of tomato leaves crushed underfoot in the dark. Somewhere past 1 in the morning, feeding the coals, Hannah said it low, almost to herself, the thing her mother used to say, the words off the lid. For when you're ready to start again. Margie's hands went still on the tarp. She had heard that sentence before. She was too tired to remember where. She looked at the girl across the dull red light of the burner, and something turned over in her, far down, the way soil turns, and you catch a glint of something you buried and forgot. Then the cold pulled her back, and the coals needed feeding, and the moment closed over like water. They held the burner till the sky went gray. By morning, most of the row had held. The leaves were limp but alive, and they'd lift again once the sun got on them. 3 plants at the low end of the row had not. They stood black and slumped, the frost having found the one pocket the smoke couldn't reach. Hannah marked the 3 with a stick, the way you mark a thing you mean to remember. Then she sat down in the dirt beside Margie, both of them gray-faced and smoke-stung, and they watched the frost burn off the saved rows in the first light, steam rising off the leaves like the field was letting out a held breath. "We kept most of it," Hannah said. "Most of it." Margie looked at the 3 black plants, then at the long green row that had lived. "That's farming. You don't get to keep all of it. You just fight for the part you can." She planted them, not really believing. 20 years is a long time to ask anything to wake up. It was Hannah's own idea, and she did it quiet, the way you do a thing you don't want to be talked out of. She took the can down from the kitchen shelf one evening after the market figures were done, and she opened one of the waxed packets, her mother's tomatoes, the ones Grace had carried out of this house 2 decades ago and planted every spring of Hannah's childhood. There weren't many seeds left. Hannah counted them into her palm. 9. She filled a starting tray with good soil and pressed them in, one by one, and set the tray on the sill of the seed room window where the morning light came strongest. She told herself it was an experiment. Old seed, low odds. She did not let herself hope out loud. Then she watered it, and waited, and did not utter a word to Margie. Days went by. The market took up the mornings, the seed orders the afternoons. The tray sat on the sill and did nothing, and Hannah stopped checking it as often. On the 9th morning she went in to pull a jar for an order, and she stopped at the window. 3 green shoots had broken the soil overnight. They were small, bent double, still wearing the seed coat on their heads like caps they hadn't shrugged off yet, pale at the stem where they hadn't met the sun. But they were up. 3 of 9, after 20 years in a coffee can in the back of a dead woman's car. "Mrs. Coyle," Hannah's voice came out thin. "Margie, come here." Margie came, slow, drying her hands on her apron, expecting a question about an order. She looked where the girl was looking. For a moment she didn't understand. Then she did. "Grace's tomatoes," Hannah said. "From the can. They were still alive." Margie did not answer. She leaned down close to the tray, both hands on the sill to hold herself, and looked at the 3 small shoots. And as she looked, something came back to her. Not a name, not a face, but a smell. Tomato leaves in August heat, sharp and green. A young woman standing at this exact window with a child on her hip, the child's hand reaching for a jar. The smell of that summer, 20 years gone, rising up off 3 seedlings the size of her thumbnail. She reached out one stiff finger and touched a leaf, barely. The way you touch something you're afraid isn't really there. She didn't say anything. There was nothing that would have fit. 3 green shoots had broken the soil overnight. Margie looked at them, and for no reason she could name, her eyes filled. Something in the room had come back to life, and part of her had too. Outside, a truck slowed on the road. Neither of them heard it. It carried the morning mail. In it was a letter from the bank, with a date that would end the season of small things being enough. But that was the next morning's trouble. For now there were 3 green shoots on the windowsill, and an old woman who could not say why she was crying, and a girl who understood enough not to ask. The letter she had been afraid to open said what she already knew. 1 payment behind. After that, the bank would come. Hannah opened it for her. Margie had held the envelope a long minute and then handed it across the table without a word, and Hannah read it twice, slow, the way you read a thing you want to be sure you understand before you say it out loud. 60 days, Hannah said. You bring the loan current in 60 days, they stop the process. You don't, they file. After that, it's out of your hands. How much to bring it current? Hannah told her. It was not the whole debt. The whole debt was a mountain. It was the overdue piece, the part that had slipped behind while the harvests failed. A smaller mountain. Still a mountain. The phone rang that same afternoon. It was Caleb. He'd heard. They always heard. And his voice was kind, and he raised the offer. A little more for the land. A little more for the collection. The new number would clear the overdue piece and the mountain behind it both, with room to spare. I don't want to pressure you, he said, which is what people say when they are. But the timing works for everyone. You sign, this all goes away. The deadline he gave her was the same week the bank would file. Margie hung up and sat with both hands flat on the table. Hannah had been working on the other thing, the seeds, for 2 weeks now, on the phone in the evenings, at the library computer in town. She laid it out careful. There's a way to protect the collection no matter what happens to the land, she said. We pledge the varieties open source. It's a real legal thing. Once they're pledged, nobody can ever patent them or anything bred from them. Not Brandt, not anyone. Then we deposit backup samples with a seed library, and we've got our digitized records to prove these varieties existed first. She paused. Your grandmother's beans stay free forever. That part, we can win. For a moment it sounded like a way out. Then Margie watched the girl's face and saw there was more, and the more was the catch. But, Margie said, Hannah didn't look away from her. But the second we pledge them open source, they're worth nothing to Brandt. Brandt's whole offer is for the right to own them. Take that away, and there's no offer. The money goes with it. She let it sit. You can keep the seeds free, or you can take Caleb's money and save the land. You can't do both. The thing that protects the seeds is the same thing that kills the sale. There it was, laid out plain on the kitchen table. Save the land and let Brandt fence in 50 years of seed, or set the seed free for good and lose the ground it grew in. Margie got up. She did not say anything. She walked into the seed room and stood among the jars, and she went down the rows the way she had 1,000 times, reading the labels she could have recited blind. Aunt Pearl's Pole Bean, 1971. June's Tennessee Greasy. The Hartman Squash. Names of the dead, every one. People who had handed her a fistful of seed across a fence or a kitchen table and trusted her to keep it going. She stopped at the jar near the window. Daniel's glass gem, fall 88. She stood there the way you stand at a graveside, asking a question you know won't be answered. Take the money and let them fence in the seeds, or set the seeds free and let the land go. 50 years of names were watching her decide which way to lose. She chose the seeds. Everyone who heard it said she had chosen to lose. She told Hannah on a Thursday night, plain, the way she said most hard things. We pledge them, all of it, free, the way they came to me. She did not look up from her hands when she said it. I'm not going to be the one who put a fence around 50 years of other people's trust, so a company could rent it back to my neighbors. It was the right thing. Hannah knew it was the right thing. It was also the end of the farm, and they both knew that too. Caleb didn't argue when Hannah called to tell him. He just went quiet and said he was sorry to hear it, and that the offer would stand until it couldn't. Then the line went dead, and with it went the only money that could have brought the loan current before the bank filed. That was the night Hannah broke. She had held together through all of it. The road, her mother's death, the car she slept in, the long nights on the library computer. But sitting in the dark kitchen with the offer gone and the deadline coming, she did the math one more time. And the math came out the same way it had been coming out all week. If she had never knocked on that gate, if she had never said the word open source, the old woman would have taken the money. The old woman would have kept her land. She stood up and started gathering her things. Quiet, so as not to wake the house. The quilt, the boots, the milk crate of books. Loading the car in the dark, because leaving was the one thing she had always known how to do. My mother came here with nothing, she said, when Margie found her at the car. Her voice shook. You gave her a future. And I came here, and I cost you the only thing you had left. I won't do that. I won't be the thing that took your farm. She reached for the car door. Stop! Margie stood in the doorway, the kitchen light behind her, one hand on the frame. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Grace's girl. It was the first time she had called her anything but Hannah. The name landed in the dark between them and held. 20 years I couldn't remember your mother's face, Margie said. Tonight I can. I remember a young woman who showed up here with nothing and worked like she had everything to prove, and who left this place better than she found it. I gave her seeds. You know what she left me? Hannah didn't answer. She couldn't. Your mother didn't take anything from me. Margie's voice did not break, but it came close. She left you. Hannah's hand came off the car door. They stood like that a long moment, the two of them on either side of the open door, the night air moving between the house and the dark. An old woman in a lit doorway, calling a dead woman's name through her living daughter. The cold came in off the fields, and neither of them moved to shut it out. For 20 years, she had carried the can. She had never once thought she might be what it was carrying her toward. Come inside, Margie said. We're not done. I don't know how we're not done, but I didn't choose those seeds so you could drive off in the dark and leave me to lose alone. Hannah closed the car door. The empty one this time, not the loaded one. She came inside. For the first time, she picked the can up herself and held it the way the girl had held it at the gate. It was morning. The kitchen was quiet, the coffee not yet on. Hannah was still asleep in the back room. She slept in the house now, had since the night at the car. The can sat on the shelf where it had sat for weeks, and Margie had walked past it 100 times without reaching for it. This morning she reached. She turned it in her hands. An old Folgers can, rust along the lip, the dents of 20 years of travel. She thumbed the lid loose the way she'd watched Hannah do it that first day. And there, on the underside of the lid, in pencil gone soft and gray with age, were 4 words she had been told about, but never read with her own eyes. For when you're ready to start again. She read it once. Then she stopped. She knew that hand. She knew the way the G dropped its tail and curled back. She knew the short, flat stroke across the T, the one Daniel used to tease her about. Said she crossed her T's like she was in a hurry to get somewhere. She had written grocery lists in that hand, and seed labels, 400 of them in the next room, and letters once, years ago, to a young woman who wrote back every fall. The hand was her own. She had written it. 20 years ago, at this same table, she had filled a coffee can with seed for a young mother who had nothing, picked up a pencil, written 4 words on the lid, and handed it across. And forgotten. The can, the words, the woman, all of it, swallowed up in the years and the burials and the long grief after Daniel. And it came back. Not in pieces now, all at once. A hot August. A young woman named Grace at the seed room window, sleeves rolled, a child on her hip reaching for a jar. The girl had been small enough to hide under the kitchen table, and had all that summer peering out at the grown-ups' boots. Grace, who would not take money, would not take more than a season's work, who cried when Margie pressed the can into her hands and said she had nothing to give back. "You don't owe me anything," Margie had told her. "Just grow them out, and come back when you're ready." She never came back. She'd been waiting all those years to be ready, and by the time she was, the address had changed, and then she was gone. And it was her daughter standing at the gate instead with the can held out like a question. Margie sat down at the table. She held the can against her chest, both arms around it. The way you hold something you've just understood you almost lost. The way the girl had held it at the gate. Hannah came in then, woke by something, and found the old woman crying at the kitchen table with the coffee can in her arms. "I remember her," Margie said. Her voice was wet and certain. "I remember your mother. Grace." The window, the beans. She looked up, and a small broken laugh came through the tears. "I remember you. You used to hide under that table." Hannah went very still. "That's my own writing," Margie said, turning the lid so the girl could see. "On the lid. I wrote that. I'm the one who gave it away." She had given the seeds away once and forgotten. They had spent 20 years finding their way home. The handwriting on the lid was her own. She had written the first line of this story 20 years ago, and forgotten she was the one holding the pen. No one wrote a single check big enough to matter. They wrote 100 small ones instead. The legal part came first, and it came quiet. With Hannah doing the calling and a farm lawyer named Donna Ruiz doing the work, pro bono, through a growers' advocacy group 2 towns over, the collection went under an open-source pledge, variety by variety. Backup samples went to a seed library. The digitized records, the ones Hannah had built all those evenings, sat in a file marked with dates, proving each variety had existed on this farm for decades. Once that was filed, Brandt's whole plan came apart. You cannot patent a derivative of a seed the law now says belongs to everyone. Caleb's lawyers would have told him so. He came by once more to say it in person. He did not grovel, and he did not pretend he'd been wrong. He stood on the porch and looked out at the rows and said, "You've made these impossible to own. You understand that's the same as making them worthless to a company like mine." "To a company like yours," Margie agreed. He nodded, slow. There was something almost like respect in it. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Coyle, these varieties of yours may well outlive my company. I don't say that as a kindness. I say it because it's probably true." He went down the steps, and the clean car backed out, and this time the dust did not bother to chase it. That was the seeds saved. It did not save the land. Brant's money was gone with Brant, and the bank's clock was still running. The land was saved a different way, and it took the whole town to do it. The story got around Decorah the way stories do in a place like that. At the co-op, at the Saturday market, over coffee. The old Coil woman, the one with the seed room. 400 heirloom varieties, kept free for everyone, and she was about to lose the ground for it. People who had never met Margie started to send things. Not large checks, small ones. Seed orders paid in advance, money up front for tomatoes not yet in the ground, from people who had only her word that they'd grow. A community fund chipped in. A church group held a supper, and the Iowa farm mediator sat down with the bank and worked out the rest. It did not erase the debt. The debt was still a mountain and would be for years, but it cured the arrears, brought the overdue piece current, stopped the filing, kept the bank off the gate for one more season. And with the immediate danger past, Donna Ruiz drew up the other papers, a beginning farmer arrangement, lease to own, so that over time, season by season, the farm could pass to the one person young enough and stubborn enough to keep it going. To Grace's girl. The envelopes came in for weeks. Margie kept them in a box on the kitchen table, and one evening she sat and went through them, reading the names. Strangers, all of them. Names from towns she'd never visited, in handwriting she'd never see again. Each one ordering seed from a woman they trusted on nothing but a story. She held one up to Hannah. I don't know a single one of these people. They know you now. Margie looked at the box, full of small kindnesses from people who would never come to the door. Strangers were paying, in advance, for seeds they trusted her to grow. The trust came first. The seeds would follow. It was not enough to erase the debt. It was enough to keep the gate from changing hands before spring. For now, that was the whole of the victory, and it was enough. In the spring, Hannah took the can to the field before the sun was fully up. The frost was out of the ground at last. The driftless hills were going green again the way they did every year, careless of who had nearly lost what over the winter. Hannah walked out past the seed room, past the bean trellises she'd mended over the cold months, to a short patch of turned earth at the end of the garden she'd set aside for one thing. She carried the coffee can the way her mother had, both hands, like it might still spill. Inside were the tomato seeds. Grace's tomatoes, grown out from the 3 that woke on the windowsill, multiplied over a season into more than enough. The variety had a future now. It would not run out again. She knelt at the end of the row and pressed the seeds in, one at a time, the way Margie had taught her. A thumb's depth, a hand's width apart. Firm the soil over each so the rain wouldn't carry it off. The morning was quiet, except for the birds starting up and the far sound of a tractor on someone else's land. When the row was in, she pushed a small wooden marker into the soil at its head. She'd cut it and lettered it herself over the winter on a night she didn't tell anyone about. Grace's row. She sat back on her heels and looked at it. Her mother had carried these seeds for 20 years and never made it back to this ground. She'd waited her whole life to be ready, and the readiness came too late. And the woman who gave her the can and the woman who kept it would never stand in this field together. There was no fixing that. Some rows you plant for people who won't see them come up. A door opened behind her, up at the house. Margie came out onto the porch, slower than a year ago, a cane now, but out under her own power. She settled into the chair by the rail, the same spot she'd stood a year back when a stranger's daughter rattled up to the gate with a rusted can. She looked down the slope at the garden, at the girl kneeling in the dirt, at the small marker catching the first light. She didn't call out. She didn't have a speech in her, and the moment didn't ask for one. She just lifted one hand off the arm of the chair, a small thing, half a wave, the kind of gesture that means I see you and nothing more and everything more. Hannah, down in the field, raised her hand back. Then she turned to her work. There were other rows to plant. There always would be, every spring, for as long as someone was willing to kneel down and put the seed in the ground. She pressed the last seed into the soil and stood up. Grace never saw this row, but every plant in it would carry her name. Was there someone in your life who gave you something small, right when you needed it most, that they may not even remember giving? Tell us about them in the comments. And if this story found you today, give it a like and share it forward to someone still waiting for their own time to start again.